Serious, divers of Reddit, what is your most horrifying experience underwater? I was on a wreck dive off Oahu down about 90 feet with an ex-girlfriend and the owner of a local dive shop. The ex and I are experienced divers and we were all just messing around, checking out the wreck and the turtles nearby. There had been a group that was on the wreck but they had left as we descended, so it was just us three. About halfway into the dive another person shows up, alone. He got the attention of the dive shop owner, and after furious scribbling on slates, the shop owner came over to us and wrote out, "You both stay down and finish your dive. I'm taking him up." And then turned to the other dude and gave the guy his octopus regulator to breathe from. We didn't really know what was going on, so we had a perfectly lovely dive, got some good pictures, and ascended like normal. When we got back on the boat we heard the story. That other guy was from a different boat and had been diving a totally different dive site. He somehow got separated and lost, and had somehow drifted about a mile away from where he went in. There was nothing else around in the direction he was going except Tahiti a few thousand miles away. Worst part is that the other guy's boat didn't even realize he was gone and left without him. If that guy hadn't floated past our wreck, I don't know what would have happened. The current pushes you away from land where we were, and since the boat didn't even know he was lost, he would have been floating out for a long time before someone realized they had a missing diver. This is terrifying. The idea of dying alone, fully aware of your impending fate, hits something visceral in me. One of my first dives was in crap show conditions. There was a strong current and so much sand debris everywhere that visibility was at about 12 inches. For some reason the dive master was like, "It'll be fine once we get below 40 feet. We started descending on a guide wire, and after getting to about 55 feet my brother and I, who were dive partners, could not see anyone else in the group. We waited at the bottom of the wire for 10 minutes and after no one showed up we started to think that the rest of the group would be waiting on the surface. We came up and one guy from our group was at the buoy looking confused and the boat was gone. Turns out there were so many problems that the boat driven away so that the waves wouldn't throw it on top of us, but there were such large swells that the boat couldn't relocate us. We floated for about an hour before finally getting the boat's attention and being picked up. By far the worst motion sickness dehydration I've ever experienced. That dive master needs to be fired. My first dive ever. My goggles strap snapped off the rental gear and they floated away. I wasn't scared really, but I was 50 featuring underwater without vision. I just kept knocking my tank, which makes a specific noise in the water signaling my dive group. Eventually my goggles were handed to me and we carried on our way with the dive. I can see how it would be easy to freak out, but I just trusted my group and my training, and their response time didn't take more than 15-20 seconds. During my PADI open water in Australia about 10-15 years ago, and aside from all the hilarious brushes with jellyfish and Aussies and, even worse, other Brits, I had a good dive that was just beautiful. Warm, clear water, good dive buddies, calm seas, loads of fish, just what you hope for, except that I'm having trouble equalizing. It's not awful, just a bit distracting, so I carry on. Eventually, we head back up and the pain starts to increase. Still not debilitating or anything, just that I'm becoming more aware of it. Back on the boat and it's still there, so I talk to the dive master and he just waves it off. I stick my finger in my ear and can almost feel something in there. He says it's a bubble of water and not to worry. Okay, grand. Except it doesn't feel liquidy, it feels solidy, and it hurts a lot. Now, I keep trying and failing to not stick my fingers in there, but each failure still yields no results until suddenly I feel a scraping as I withdraw my pinky. There, sat on my finger as happy as a clam is a tiny bastard crab. I look at him, he looks at me, I look at the other divers, they look sick. I look at the crab and I swear to God he gave me a Cheerio type wave and just scuttled off my finger and onto the deck before disappearing behind some kit. I spent the next little forever convincing myself it didn't lay eggs or leave a few mates behind. He didn't, by the way, and generally wondering why we have stupid crab holes built into our stupid heads. From now on I will only refer to it as crab holes. Probably my most horrifying experience is seeing firsthand how underqualified and ignorant some divers and even dive professionals are. I'm pretty sure a girl on our Palau liveaboard had no idea what deco limits were. She just dove until her air ran out. The rest of us could hear her dive watch beeping like crazy nearly every dive. On another dive off Charleston, the dive instructor had a clearly panicked diver and either didn't notice or didn't care. There was a lot of silt and surge, and the odd angle the wreck was resting on gave you a kind of vertigo. I wasn't in their group, but right at the start of the dive I see a guy absolutely racing for the mooring line, so I ended my dive to ascend with him. When he hugged me on the surface as thanks for hanging with him, I teared up a little and wanted to punch that instructor in the face. Oh, another horrifying experience is seeing dive masters manhandle marine life, even grabbing a porcupine fish to make it puff up. That happened in Nevis. But overall, recreational diving is awesome and very safe when done properly. If anyone reading this thread is thinking about learning, do not let these stories scare you off. The world underwater is incredible. Was spearfishing and had a stringer of fish. On one of my dives I felt a hard tug and turned just in time to see a Goliath grouper inhaling my entire stringer, which was tied to my belt. This experience was only made worse by the fact that I was freediving and about 40 feet down. Well, till what a Goliath grouper is, and dang, that's a big fish. A 16-year-old kid at 50 feet, face down, dead. He breathed down his tank looking for his 17-year-old buddy. After they got separated, other kid died too. Bad day on that beach. Coast Guard and a dive boat pulled them both out in front of about 30 families and kids enjoying the nice weather. Coming up from a dive in Indonesia, didn't realize a sea snake was coming up for air at the same time until I surfaced. Everyone on the boat just started yelling snake. I kept my distance and it went back down, but it freaked me out how close it was. If they hadn't have warned me I might have run into it. Did a second dive and saw the bugger again. He kept following me for a bit and that freaked me out. I had to make an emergency ascent from 120 featuring while wreck diving off the coast of North Carolina. The longest 2 minutes of my life. I was 30 meters below the surface in a small shipwreck. At one point my tank softly hits the ceiling and my jacket kept inflating, which means I was quickly going back up to the surface, which is really dangerous. I noticed something was wrong when I couldn't deflate the jacket. I had to quickly swim down with all my might to reach fellow divers, but it was really difficult. Of course this results in consuming more oxygen. I had to stop the airflow from the tank to my jacket and then I was able to deflate it. I had to inflate it manually for the rest of the dive. I was also diving with a group of beginners once and there was a lot of underwater current at one point. Eventually someone got sick and was going to throw up. He was about to remove his mask to puke, but the instructor quickly swam towards him and stuck her hand on his mask. The guy had to puke in his regulator. Oh, and some other guy found a moray eel and pointed at it. He got bit. The fish love it when someone pukes through their regulator. Was drift diving about 110 feet down off the shelf in Cozumel. Partner and I didn't realize our depth, stupid mistake. I know. Had to take 2 safety stops with only 300 C remaining in the tank. We had a can of spare air, good for about 45 breaths. 2 safety stops and I feel the air in my tank getting easier and easier to pull. Not good. Made it to the surface with less than 100 C. Didn't get nitrogen sickness. Was intense. Well, this is actually quite nice. There's rays of sun coming down, and there's the fish and, oh my freaking god, what is that? It is huge. Oh, a sunfish. Cool. I think that's why I couldn't ever do diving or anything. I'm afraid of things much larger than me. It's probably because I'm quite tall and a little on the hefty side, so I don't come across them all that often, and when I do, they are to be feared. I was in Belize for a multi-day diving trip with a girlfriend. This was her first dive trip after getting open water certified. We dove the blowhole and a few other spots, and because of the depth and number of dives we had to do a decompression stop for 5-10 minutes or so at the end of this last dive. During that last dive, my girlfriend was struggling with water getting in her mask and started to panic, and we were between 45-60 feet down. I could see she was freaking out and pointing to her mask and slowly going toward the surface. I was trying to make signs to her that she had to stay down and to not go to the surface, but it was really hard to communicate that. At around 15 feet I had to physically grab her and start pulling her down. She had a little air in her BCD which wasn't helping. I cleared any air from her BCD and just started pulling her down. It was really so scary. No one wants the bends. When we finally got on the boat, she thought I was just mad at her for not swimming with the rest of the group, thinking I didn't understand she was having mask issues and didn't realize what I was trying to tell her. Kudos to you for keeping a level head and panicking. This is why we dive with buddies. When you're having a problem, sometimes you need that calm other person to convince and or force you to follow the rules we learn in training. When I was a young diver about 10 years ago, I took a trip down to Florida to do a little diving on the reefs off Boynton Beach, and also a couple of wrecks, one of which was the Spiegel Grove down in the Keys. The other was the Captain Tony Great Dive. I was diving with one of the better known outfits in the Lago Travanere area. The weather was sunny and seas were calm. The boat was moderately crowded. I was without a buddy since I was alone, so I informally paired up with a fellow seated next to me on the boat who had been diving for 5 years, although this was to be his 30th log dive and his first wreck. The dive shop required him to pay for a guide since it was his first wreck dive. An instructor had a couple of students along who he was checking out for their AOW deep and wreck dives. This instructor was also my buddy's guide. I decided to tag along with the instructor, his 2 students and my buddy. When we got to the grove, the current was ripping and we had to pull ourselves along a line against the current to the mooring ball and then descend the line to the bridge of the ship at about 70 feet. Before we hit the water, the instructor stated he would go down the rope first, followed by his 2 students, then me, then my buddy. He said we would all meet at the bottom and then swim around, etc. The current was very strong all the way to the bottom. Before entering the water, me and my buddy did a check and everything appeared to be in order. Upon reaching the bridge of the ship, I immediately noticed 2 things. 1. The instructor and his students were not waiting for us at the bottom, and 2. My buddy's tank had fallen out of the strap on his BC and was dangling off in the current in the general direction of Miami. I was able to communicate to him that he had a problem and I turned him around and started working on the tank strap, which had twisted round his first stage in a Houdini-like series of knots. After about 10 minutes, no small amount of time at that depth and sucking air at the rate I was due to nervousness, I got the strap around the tank somewhat snugly. I was unable to tighten it to what I considered safe since, as I found out later, a plastic spacer piece had apparently floated off. We stayed down another 5 minutes or so, then started up since I had used a lot of air. Fortunately, the strap held all the way up the line and back to the boat. I found out later that his regulator had also cracked and half the way up he was sucking water with each breath. His equipment was pretty crappy. The instructor never materialized until we were back on the boat. All's well that ends well, but if I were my buddy, I'd have been a little peeved that his guide wasn't around at the bottom to keep an eye on him. I was able to deal with the tank strap myself, but there was a period of time where I wasn't sure if I could get the thing untangled and could have used an extra set of hands. Fun times. Know a guy who was out diving for crayfish, lobster. By the ocean they hide under the rocks. As he was diving, a tiger shark emerged from a cave and rammed him, broke his arm and ribs. He managed to climb up onto the rocks before it was possible for anything else to happen. He said the shark was just testing him out. After a day of boat diving in Monterey Bay on the California coast, we had a night dive planned. I was there with 2 friends celebrating my birthday, and we were part of a larger group of divers on a chartered boat. My friends were too tired for the night dive, and I really was too, but was invited to buddy with another diver whose friends also decided to stay on the boat. Being tired and night diving in a kelp forest with an unfamiliar diving buddy is not a combination I would recommend. So, I'm following my new buddy through the kelp when some of it catches on my tank. I tried to pull clear, but managed to get tangled even more, to the point that I was unable to move. I kept shining my light around, looking for my buddy, but he was nowhere to be seen. After what seemed like an hour, it was probably just a few minutes, I felt some of the kelp loosen up and then saw that my buddy was cutting it off with his knife. I was so exhausted after struggling that when we got to the surface, he had to tow me back to the boat. My so and I are going on a resort dive in St. Martin. We are both certified but forgot to bring our cert cards. There is only one other couple, so just 4 divers, the dive master and the dive boat captain. We watch the video, do a couple of practice mask clears and regulator finds in the pool, then off we go for a 35 feet dive. We get to the dive spot, DM tells So and I to go down first, follow the rope down, get to the bottom, sit on your knees, other two will be down, then DM will be down. We'll clear masks and do a regulator find, then off we go to see what we can find. So and I get to bottom, woman from other couple gets to bottom, man doesn't quite make it, he keeps floating back up, DM grabs him, pulls him down, he floats off again, DM chases him down, drags him to the area we are in, pushes him on his knees into the sand, he stays, we do the clears and reg finds, off we go. This guy's is still having buoyancy problems. I sympathize. I've had a hard time with buoyancy control before. But this guy is really all over the place. He's crashing into me, crashing into his girlfriend, crashing into my everywhere. About 20 minutes into the dive, he goes up to the boat with his girlfriend. So and I finish the dive, see some eagle rays, watch the DM spear a couple of lionfish, see a turtle, a good dive for us. Get to the surface, back on the boat, I say to the guy, so sorry you were having such buoyancy control issues. It really sucks to be bouncing around like that, and other encouraging words about how it took me a few dives to figure it out. His girlfriend says to me I think he did a great job considering he'd never been in the water before yesterday and doesn't know how to swim. It took all I had, and the strong hands of my to prevent me from going off on the couple and the DM. But, hey. Who signs up for diving if you don't know how to swim? Fast forward a few months, So and I are taking a refresher dive course. First night, we all hope we end the pool to swim 8 laps to prove we can swim, tread water, etc. As we are making our way down to the pool, I jokingly ask, everyone here knows how to swim, right? Everyone laugh, until one guy said he did not. The DM of our class was awesome. Showed the guy how to doggy paddle and told the guy he could do all the shallow end stuff while learning to swim throughout the class. End of class. Guy got his certification and knew how to swim. Now, I always ask when I get on a dive boat if everyone knows how to swim. That is absolutely mind-boggling. When I did my certification, the pool swim stuff was barely a second thought. The instructor just told us all to hop in the pool and do laps for 10 minutes. We were all fine swimmers. I have no idea why someone would think they could scuba dive if they couldn't even swim. I was diving off the coast of California near a kelp bed in this beautiful marine preserve. The scenery down there is amazing. I came across this area that was destroyed. All the sand and plants were trodden. There was a dive club that carved a path of destruction down there. They pulled up abalone and sand dollars for souvenirs and left the bottom looking like crap. I don't usually care about that stuff, but the area is a marine preserve meant for diving and you guys left it way worse than you found it. That's so very sad. They destroy something beautiful to have a souvenir. It probably just lays somewhere in their home. I was doing my advanced open water at Dutch Springs in Pennsylvania. We were planning on going from a school bus to a helicopter that is sunk in the quarry. I am with my advanced open water group. 2 dive masters and my stepbrother was my dive buddy. I swim inside the bus, swim out, and no one in my group is at the bus. I begin to panic but keep my cool due to just being trained, thankfully. There are ropes that go from vehicle to vehicle for people to follow and to guide you. I am still at the bus and a group of people come back. I think to myself that's gotta be my group. But after looking at tanks and fins I decide that's not my group at all. Now the real panic sinks in. I get my barriers and remember northeast is the shore where we entered. So I grab the rope that is pointed in that direction and swim along it, alone. I feel like I am pulling along this rope for like 10-20 minutes, but in actuality it was only about 5 minutes. When I surface close to the shore I see my family there on the shore about to go on their own dive. I tell them what happened and in about 20-30 minutes the dive group I went with surfaces near us. Instead of being surprised I wasn't there for most of the time, they ask me how the dive was. They had no idea and neither did my stepbrother that I was gone. I couldn't imagine if something had actually happened to me down there and no one came to help or even realized. Truly terrifying for my 17-year-old self. Ran out of air about 12-15 featuring down. We were on a rig in the Gulf of Mexico. This was my third outing after getting recertified. I took a whole semester in college, but never really pursued it after. The first dive in the morning went fine. On the second dive, the dive master wanted to know when the first person was at 800c so we could ascend to the safety stop at 15 featuring, and then surface. I was the first one to 800. During the stop I quickly noticed how hard it was to breathe, and then it was gone. I got up as quick as I could, but was gasping when I surfaced. The regulator malfunctioned and had frozen at the 800c level. When the tank was inspected on the boat, it was empty. This was rented equipment. If I hadn't been paying attention to the regulator or stayed down a few more minutes. Looking back, that whole dive had safety problems. Things could have been worse. There are people who have been on thousands of dives and never had an issue. My personal opinion is that it is a skill that needs to be practiced fairly frequently. It's easy to forget things, and when you combine that with a challenging environment, things can go bad quickly. Dive safe. I was dive master on a live aboard in the Bahamas in 1992. We were diving at a place called Eric's Blue Hole. The boat was a large, steel, crew boat converted for diving. The Miss Lindsay run out of Lynn Haven Dive Center in Virginia Beach, VA, and Xanadu Dive Center in Freeport, Grand Bahamas. Anyway, there were no mooring buoys back then, so we would take a line down with a wreck hook on it, wrap it around the base of a coral head, and hook it back to itself. Done correctly, it would do no damage to the coral. So, I take the line down, take it around the coral head, and hook it off on itself. It's a choppy day and the boat is bouncing around appreciably up above and it's giving the line a pretty good tug as it goes tight. I lay off and watch it for about a minute, and, satisfied it's going to hold and it's not wrecking the coral, I start to rise up over the coral head to ascend back up the line to the surface. Just as I cross over top of the coral head, the boat lurched hard, and the wreck hook, which looks like a giant treble hook, breaks loose, snaps around the circle like a rocket, and headed straight to me like it was shot out of a cannon. I was looking down at it when it happened and, even so, had zero opportunity to do a damn thing but watch it unfold in what seemed like slow motion. For some time I had been in the habit of clipping my dive computer to my BC across my chest. It kept it from dragging behind me, bouncing off stuff, and it was always close at hand for me to check. By nothing but sheer luck, the wreck hook got me in the chest, dead center on my dive computer. It gutted the dive computer, bounced off my face mask right at the left eye, pulling the mask off my face, and went in its merry way. I had not a single scratch or bruise. I caught my mask in the water and my dive computer was destroyed, but didn't free flow. I could have taken that hook right in the heart, or in the left eye, or it could have left my air supply compromised. Somehow, I dodged all three outcomes and made a safe ascent. Which is not to say I didn't suck down most of the air in my tank, hyperventilating, before I got there. Smile. P.S. I didn't even have to wash my dive skin. Smile. Something I could have prevented. Did a dive with a cold. Burst all the blood vessels in my middle ears. Couldn't hear properly for weeks. Something I couldn't have prevented. Suddenly, so many jellyfish. Got wrecked. Absolutely torn up by those little suckers. Water was crazy warm so just had BCD on and some shorts. Was awful. I hate jellies. Doing a night dive as part of my training. Part of it involves cutting off any light source. Now imagine it is pitch black. You don't really know which way is up or see your hand in front of your face. But you know what you can see? Hundreds of eyes. Of what? I had no freaking clue. Excuse me. I need some scientific validation of what this is, otherwise I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight because that sounds terrifying. As someone who is doing training soon, I should not have read this thread. Pay attention to the safety aspects. Take responsibility for yourself. Don't wait to be asked how much air you have. Check for yourself regularly, etc. Have fun. Diving is like flying. Neither is inherently dangerous. Both are incredibly unforgiving. Do something stupid. Win stupid prizes. I was doing a deep dive to around 200 feet on the coast of New York. We were diving on a German U-boat that had tons of corrugated and rusty metal hanging down. I was diving solo, but there were two others on the dive, a father and son. After spending about 10 minutes down there, I decided to go up to minimize decompression. After 50 minutes they had still not ascended, so the captain sent me down to check and make sure everything was okay. When I got down there, the son was stuck under a piece of metal and his father was desperately trying to get him out. After I helped lift the metal off of the son, I could immediately tell that they were in panic mode. Having a dangerously high amount of nitrogen in their body, the worst thing they could do would be to bolt up to the surface. If they did that, I knew they would be as good as dead, because of the bends. We went to the mooring line and I began to start buddy breathing with the son and his father at the same time cause they were extremely low on air. After the father had a long breath, the son lost all control and bolted to the surface. His father tried to follow him, which I tried stopping by holding onto his BCD while my feet were hooked to the mooring. Unfortunately, he escaped my grip and launched after his son. Up at the surface, everyone knew that things were seriously wrong. The swells were upwards of 10 feet, and it was extremely difficult to get back on board. By the time the father and son were on the boat, the father was basically dead. After his entire body went numb, he lost consciousness. The Coast Guard came via helicopter, but the father was already dead. The captain demanded that they should just take the son and immediately take him to the chamber, as they refused and wasted the precious time on putting the dead father in the chopper too, which was extremely difficult cause of his weight and the swaying. By the time they brought the son to the chamber, he had already died too. This is the most unforgettable story on here. What a tragic event to be part of. Hope you've found peace. I did one of those shark diving experiences in the Bahamas where you sit on the bottom of the open ocean with a group of other divers in a semicircle and a man in a chainmetal suit feeds sharks dead fish and stuff. No cage. Well, you're instructed not to move and to keep your hands close to your body so a shark doesn't mistake it for food. For some reason my airline from my tank on my back to my regulator was exceptionally long and stuck way above my head in a big loop. One of the sharks somehow managed to get stuck in it or something because I felt my line being pulled hard and felt this large animal struggling on my back. I bit down on my regulator as hard as I could with the fear of it being ripped out of my mouth and not being able to retrieve it. Luckily after 10 terrifying seconds the shark got unstuck. I thought for sure I was about to either have my head bit open or have my line ripped out of my mouth. Easily the most terrifying experience of my life. You were on the buddy reg. It's a longer line you are supposed to tuck away. My first night dive, we were diving on a rock called Sunken Rock, which is a column of rock which reaches about 110 feet at its deepest. We weren't supposed to go below 60 feet, but I was engrossed in the beautiful reef colors and realized I was at 100 feet and my dive partner had disappeared around the rock. I freaked out for a few minutes that I couldn't find the rest of our group, and then I saw the lights and found my partner. Luckily had only spent a minute or so at that depth, but those few minutes of panic were awful. My first night dive was terrifying for me because I was so afraid of getting lost. I followed the dive master so closely that when he stopped, I hit the top of my head on his tank. Telling this story of a friend who doesn't have Reddit. I have his permission, but he asked I change his name, so I'll call him Carl. Carl is a commercial diver, young, 19, and he works with his dad and one other guy on a gooey duck boat. This was his first season actually diving and extracting the gooey ducks, and while he was down there someone came up to his boat in a speedboat, and the driver of the speedboat paid no attention to Carl's airlines and whatnot going down to his suit. So he was about 50 feet down and the boat engine sucked his lines up into it, pulling Carl from 50 feet to about 8 feet in 2 seconds. He was scared to say the least. Survived. Didn't get the bends. Going out to do it again come September. Whoa. Gearduck. Had the mooring buoy break and the boat captain not realize the boat was drifting while I and 2 others were guiding around 15 certified divers and 2 students, doing our standard AM2 tank. And there were 4 staff on the boat, 2 instructors, one of whom was just acting as a guide, myself and one other dive guide, both of us diver masters. The other diver master and I swapped guiding and captaining. One instructor was taking care of the students and the other guided on both dives. So it was a super rainy day, rainy enough that we couldn't see the shore. The sites we visited were only 1-2 mile max offshore. No waves or wind though, just a heavy downpour. And the visibility was 50-60 feet. Not the worst conditions by any stretch of the imagination. We reached the first dive site. I was surface support. Everyone goes down and everything goes swimmingly. We reach the second site and head down after doing a decently long surface interval. Important to note, 2 divers stayed up on the boat due to motion sickness, one of whom was a single woman. Yes, that is important to this. I take my half of the group one way, the other goes another. The instructor and students go off their way. About 40 minutes later we all have made our way back to where the descent line should be, and lo and behold there's nothing to be seen. Personally I just thought I had misjudged our distance and that it was a little further down the reef. But when the other guide swam over to me and wrote boat on her magnet board I knew crap had gone sideways. We gathered everyone together in a group while the senior instructor surfaced to check for the boat, and when he didn't see it he called everyone up. Thankfully most of our dive sites in that area were pretty close together and within swimming distance, so we swam to the nearest mooring buoy and had everyone drop their weights. We sat for an hour or so, occasionally catching sight of the boat and yelling at the top of our lungs in the hope that the guy on it would hear us. He didn't. Eventually other boats from the shop came out and followed the line of mooring buoys until they found us and hauled us out. We come to find out that the other dive master, instead of keeping an eye on surface conditions, spent most of the time flirting with the diver who stayed up top and thought nothing of the fact that the descent line was floating up near the bow of the boat instead of the stern. Needless to say, he lost his job. All divers were accounted for and nothing terrible happened, but I still get a pit in my stomach when I think of how badly it could have ended. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.